This is America Daily, bringing you the best in truthful news updates and in-depth reports happening now.
The part that I found the most disturbing is that it's among the financial people, the political people, their decisions and what they do and how they live their life. They're capable of doing this kind of stuff. Every American should be concerned and not think it's just limited to a bunch of nutcases in Hollywood.
Many of the trusted faces and the on-camera personas that we have attached ourselves to emotionally and been conditioned to will be broken. And then that means that what happens next is, who can we trust?
Welcome to America Daily. I'm Jessica Beatty. Jeffrey Epstein's arrest has raised a lot of questions about how widespread child trafficking really is, and what kind of high-level people are involved. So do the arrests of people like Epstein and R. Kelly signal that the entertainment industry is being cleaned up? And like every industry, we can't forget that there are a lot of good people in the film industry as well. Today we hear from two of the good guys. No Restrictions Entertainment is an independent film company that delves into issues Hollywood largely ignores. Their most recent film from 2018 is called A Child's Voice. It's a supernatural thriller based on the very real issue of child trafficking and ritual abuse. John Paul Rice and Edgar Michael Bravo, thanks so much for joining us today. Could you give us a little background about your company and your experience in the industry?
My name is John Paul Rice. I'm the president of No Restrictions Entertainment. I've produced 6 independent feature films in the last 10 years with Edgar Michael Bravo, to my left here. And we formed No Restrictions Entertainment to make independent films that were meaningful about issues that Edgar and I felt very strongly about through our research of issues and topics over the last several years.
Yeah, hi, my name's Edgar Bravo, and I'm the writer-director of the films that we do. And a brief background is I graduated from UCLA from the master's program in film, and I've done independent films before. I formed the company with John and was involved in directing television also.
So there's been a lot in the news recently about child trafficking because of Jeffrey Epstein's arrest. You produced a film last year called A Child's Voice. It deals with child trafficking. I wanted to ask you why you wanted to make this film.
Well, we learned about human sex trafficking of children through our research online. It started with people like Robert David Steele coming out and speaking about pedophilia long before anybody really had confirmed it. And then it led us to people such as Ronald Bernard, who was an ex-Dutch banker, financier, who gave a testimonial 2 years ago in 5 parts discussing his bringing up into this system, this financial system, from a businessman to a career criminal. And his testimony was speaking about as you moved up into these groups that it came into child sacrifice as the initiation. That if you refused that, it would ensure that you would not be brought up into the highest echelons of power. It was also confirmed by people who were talking about the satanic ritual abuse that they had experienced, the human child sex trafficking going back decades. And then we looked at people, former FBI, and the court cases, and started reading the documents and the people who were reporting on these. And we saw a consistency of a problem. And then we looked back in time and could see patterns.
Yeah, the sad part and the shocking part, because I was not, before I made the movie, I had no clue about this. I had heard a little bit in some news here and there, but I never focused on it. And as we got deeper into it and we started seeing, BBC documentaries about it, The Guardian in the UK talking about it, prime ministers involved in this horrible stuff in Belgium, the UK, and the Netherlands, across the country, across Europe and across the United States, there were all these horrible things that had been documented by police enforcement. And so it was quite a shock, because I could not believe this has been going on. So anyway, we made the movie because we said, okay, this is how we do our thing. We do research as much as possible, and then we make it into a dramatic film. We don't do documentaries. We do a drama. We base it on real stories and things, and add some fiction to it. But the basis of it is all based on facts and testimonies and so forth. So we thought this was a very important thing to do, because this is how we've done all our movies. We deal with subjects that people generally don't touch in a dramatic way. And so that's why we made the decision to do it. We thought, more people will talk about it a little bit more after seeing our movie, and then they can do the research on their own. And then they can do whatever action they feel is appropriate. But that's the reason why we got involved.
What kind of response did your film get last year when it was released?
We got a lot of great responses. I mean, from we did a premiere here in Los Angeles to a crowd of about 350, 400 people. And I remember after all of the women, young men, were coming up to our actresses, some of them in tears, didn't know that this really happened, really existed. And they were moved. They were deeply moved, because there's a message, I think, because ultimately there's a message of love and courage in the film.
Yeah, what was interesting is the response we got began to build both in the United States, and it started building in Europe and in Australia, New Zealand, and so forth. So it was great because I guess it was word of mouth, and people started looking at it. And since you've seen the film, you understand that what we do is we try to do a story so that you get involved in the story, and you care for the characters. And as you do that, you learn about other aspects of it, but mainly because you get emotionally involved. And you saw the movie, the feeling and the decisions that the main characters make is kind of like what we will do. Will we listen when people are hurting, or will we not? And I can understand that it can get overwhelming, and people, it's just too much sometimes. So that's why in the story that you saw, it had also like a love affair, because we also believe in what we've seen through all the people we've talked to and everything, that it's unifying with somebody else, bonding with somebody else, that you can both survive this kind of stuff and do something about it. It really is not something that you should go into it by yourself. The more you have a community, the better.
I think that's so important, because so many of these things are so depressing that you really need a support group or something positive to take you out of it. So you guys have been in Hollywood for quite a while now. Allegations of widespread pedophilia within the industry have been circulating for years. Is this really an open secret that everybody knows about? And if so, have you noticed any changes in the industry since the Me Too movement started?
What I've noticed is that people are more nervous and more careful. It used to be blunt. People didn't care. They just went ahead and did whatever. But thank God, as more people have learned and all that, there's people are being fired, people are being laid off, people are resigning, and they're being more careful about it, is what it seems to be.
I agree with that statement. I think that the awareness in Hollywood, especially among actors and actresses that I've spoken to, has gone up in the last several years. The Me Too movement obviously was an awakening of consciousness. Obviously, the industry wants to control its messaging and will counteract what it can to keep the worst parts out. But overall, there's a majority of people in this town today in LA that know more about human trafficking and pedophilia going on both in Hollywood and Los Angeles more than ever before.
Is it difficult to be independent filmmakers in Hollywood?
Yeah, it is. It is, especially because not just this subject, but all the subjects that we've dealt with in our films are out of the mainstream. But what is wonderful about nowadays with the internet and everything, our support comes from here. Yes, we do have some people in the industry and so forth, but mainly it comes from people all over this country, all over the world, the different people who either are involved in helping us with the film, or they're supporting it, or they're talking about it. So it's really cool. An important thing I want to say, though, that after doing the research is that, especially with this Epstein stuff, a lot of Americans may be going, oh, this just happens in Hollywood because it's Holly weird and there's all this strange stuff. And yeah, of course, it's had a long history because you're involved with egos and power and money and all that. But the frightening thing is that it is going on, but it is going on in all over major cities, all over rural areas and stuff. So it's not confined here. And I think that's sort of kind of like what they're trying to do with the media, the mainstream media is trying to say, oh, yes, here and there, and mainly in a bunch of strange Hollywood people. But no, it's not. And even more frightening, and the part that I found the most disturbing, is that it's among the financial people, the political people, those kind of the politicians and all that. That's what's scary, because they affect all of us. Their decisions and what they do and how they live their life. If they're capable of doing this kind of stuff, that's when every American should be concerned and not think it's just limited to a bunch of nutcases in Hollywood.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I interviewed someone recently who works with child trafficking survivors in Minnesota, and she was saying she wasn't surprised at all with Epstein's arrest because she sees a lot of really wealthy, successful, older men or politicians who are involved in child trafficking in Minnesota. And I was pretty shocked about that, actually. As we've already mentioned, your film actually scratches the surface of another topic that's related to child trafficking, and that's ritual abuse. This is a fairly controversial topic, yet in 2014, the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child called out the UK for not doing more to tackle this problem. I wanted to ask you how you first heard about ritual abuse and what convinced you that it really exists.
As I mentioned to you, but I didn't know any of this stuff before. And the first time I even heard about it, I couldn't sleep at night. It was just the possibility of doing something so horrible. It was just really disturbing, and I think that's a problem. One of the reasons it doesn't get out more of the information, because it's just too shocking. It's not something that anybody can process. They just want to say, "Oh, this is crazy." But unfortunately, as I said, newspapers, established newspapers, UK and so forth, and America and all that, you just have to do the research. That's why we say to people, you do your research. Because you'll be horrified when you see, oh, wait a minute, there's this happened, and they were ritually abusing these kids for whatever their dark religion thing that they do. And you find it everywhere. You find it all over the world, and you find it consistently from, traditional newspapers and magazines that do these kind of stories, and they get hushed up really quickly, but they're out there. They're a public record. So that's what was shocking, because at first I couldn't sleep. I didn't want to think about it. I was like, this is horrifying. And then, I just kind of like built up my courage and said, okay, just look into it and see. And I was just hoping that it was not true, because this would be just horrible. And unfortunately, as I said, you just have to start basically digging into the internet, and it won't stop. So yes, to answer your question, it was horrifying, and it's really, really upsetting to me. But when you kind of like have support from other people who have a human view, it gives you strength to say, okay, you can handle it. Do your best and do your part to help out.
Yeah. The other part of that is also going back in time and looking at history and looking at civilizations that existed even hundreds of years ago. And there is a tie to sacrifice, child sacrifice, Moloch and Baal.
Yeah.
And when when confronted with all this information, I also sought out people who were starting to talk about their own personal experience in satanic ritual abuse, their own childhood. And that, I think, is something that people need to do their own research on, starting with people like Jay Parker, Christy Allen, and many others, Anneke Lucas.
So during your research, you got to know some people who personally experienced ritual abuse. I was wondering if you could tell us what they thought about your film.
Oh, yeah, no, it was very touching. Ronald Bernard and a bunch of other people, they gave us great reviews on the movie, because as you saw in the film, it touches upon it only as much as is necessary. Most of our film is really about people coming together and finding a way to hang on with each other. And some other people who saw it, they understood that I had specifically used a drug addict teenage runaway boy and a runaway girl as the ones that find each other and fall in love, because that is a consequence not just of this abuse of children, but abuse of children, period, that it just causes such dysfunction that, that's where they're runaways or they're addicted or whatever. But as you saw in the movie, we try to deal with how they came together, even though we're from opposite worlds, and they came together to help each other. And then from there, they even had the energy and capacity to help the kids that needed help. So the people who saw our film that had been involved in this kind of stuff, they enjoyed that because it has that more loving human, I don't want to call it spiritual thing, because that's a whole other issue, but a human thing of of love and what can be done with that. Because I don't like to get involved with the details of all that horrible stuff that goes on, because that's just horrible stuff. I only want to touch upon it as much as it can be to awaken people to understand what's going on, and then finding someone that can help you to do something about it, to help yourself and to help others.
Have you had any pushback from the industry because of your film?
Well, what I can say I know for certain is that we invited leading people in the industry, both survivors of child abuse that have gone public, as well as multiple companies, to our premiere and to at least to know about our work through this film, and every single one of them was silent.
Yeah, it's pretty much what, as I said earlier, that everyone's very nervous and careful and all that. So at the moment, that's basically what we get, silence. There are some more powerful film people who would listen to what we have to say and are, supportive. But for the most part, everyone is just quiet. They don't want anything to do with it. They don't want to face any of this kind of stuff.
I think you guys are really brave.
There are so many people. When you do the research out there, you're going to go, oh my God, look at all these people who have, are so courageous to deal with such horrific stuff. So,
refuse to shut up.
Yeah, they're very strong people. But I bet you if you look into them, you'll find that they had a great grandma or a great grandpa or mom or a friend or someone they love that gives them so much love and caring, and they've given it to them, that this give them the strength. Because you have to have strength, and I believe that you get that strength when you have caring from people, your family or whoever, or the family that you create, that gives you that strength and ability to face this stuff and say, no, this is not something I'm going to keep quiet about. This is unjust.
That's actually a perfect transition for my next question, which is, how can we as a society help those who have been trafficked heal?
Yeah. Actually, John had brought this up before, and that is, to me, what every person who researches this and then starts figuring out what they can do or wish to do, it's up to them to figure out what they can do. The first and most important thing that can be done to help the children is for you yourself to find out what is going on and have it verified and proved for yourself, not that me or anybody else tells you. That's the first thing. Then that'll awaken you, because the damage that happens to these kids is so horrific, and you will need people who are loving and have patience and strength to help the children. And there are people who are doing this. There are many people who are beginning to take up this task.
Yeah.
And but as I said, there are many things that can be done, and each individual must find the way that they feel they can do it.
Yeah. I think supporting people like Anneke Lucas and Jay Parker, unfortunately, they both have lived experiences, but I think that's also their strongest point, is because both of them are using that experience and that knowledge and that wisdom to help other people like them. And there's a great charity out there called Ark of Hope for Children, run by Blair Corbet. He's somebody that should be admired, because without any kind of fanfare, this person has sought out satanic ritual abuse survivors and actually helped heal them, helped work with them, and adopted or found ways that these children could be adopted into loving homes. So these are the unsung heroes.
No, totally. I love those people.
They're working hands-on with survivors. For the people that are listening to this and go, what can I do? Really, it's loving your children and giving them a loving sense that they are safe and cared for and protected. Because ultimately, that's what happens, is that these pedophiles and people who do worse to children prey on the most vulnerable and weakened individuals who come from the worst homes. That's the general core of the people that they are taking in and abusing, because they're able to manipulate them.
Do you have any advice for young actors and or their parents who are trying to get in the film industry? How can people stay safe, or how can they excel in the industry?
Oh, yeah. You mean, well, for actors, the parents just have to be involved and be very alert and first know that this kind of stuff happens and the telltale signs of all that. For parents that have children that are want to be actors and so forth, like in our film, that little boy, his dad's fantastic. He cares.
Yeah.
He makes sure he's safe. Everything. He's great.
Yeah.
For people who are young men and women who want to be filmmakers, to me, the most important thing is to be authentic, to try to be into this industry because you have something that you want to say, something that you feel and believe. And you don't necessarily have to try to convince anybody, because nobody likes, manipulation, all that kind of stuff. But that you want to say something because you believe it and you just want to lay it out there. It's like, like you make a great meal and you put it out on a table and you say, okay, whoever wants to try it, does it smell good? Does it look good? And does it taste good? It's up to you as much as you want and want to or not want to and everything. To me, that's the advice I give to filmmakers who want to get into, because that gives them the strength to tell their deepest truth that they believe in, and it gives you strength to go to handle the ups and downs, because it's a crazy business. It goes up and down and all that, and it's very strong for you emotionally and psychologically, because you're not spending years trying to convince somebody about something. That's horrible to try to manipulate people in whichever way you do it, especially creative. And I point to the horrific, boring, terrible, empty films that come out of Hollywood to show stuff that's just being done, like popcorn, hamburger, McDonald's stuff, to try to make you sort of forget things for a while, and then they don't really give you any honesty. So that's the advice I have. If you meant filmmakers, that's the advice I have for young filmmakers.
For parents and children, they should know that the majority of the industry as it exists, especially in independent film, is mostly made up of people who are relatively decent.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think a lot of people, what we're talking about is a small group of people at a high level of power who have a lot of influence. And so in the independent world, it's not to say that everyone else is fine, but parents and filmmakers usually have a little bit more of a closeness versus these big productions where you have 200-300 people on set. I think parents need to be aware of the law, and they need to be aware of where their child is at all times.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that alone, just having oversight and vigilance, will curtail any potential of there being a problem.
Is there anything else you'd like to say that I didn't ask about?
No, I'm just encouraged about how there's more and more people awakening to all kinds of issues that have been buried and stuff. And as I said earlier, I really have a love for film as a way to express, your particular view of the world. So I am happy that more and more people are getting into film, either as documentaries or fiction, and because emotionally involving people is so powerful, and it can help people seek new things or have strength to deal with things. So I'm happy about that. So I want to end it on a positive note.
No, I think the another thing that we've talked about, and it's a hope, but I think it as this continues to build an awareness, especially as the Epstein case moves forward and potentially other disclosures.
Horrible.
Yeah. That initial shock is the first wave, but the second wave is the consciousness and the coalescing around new ideas, which are laws that are going to be needed. Because many of the trusted faces and the on-camera personas that we have attached ourselves to emotionally and been conditioned to will be broken. And then that means that what happens next is, who can we trust? And the only way to fix that is to have full transparency and new laws that are going to come, not automatically, but as more people learn about this, the demand will grow. And so what we think is a possibility is that in 3 to 5 years from now, you're going to be seeing a totally different industry, possibly a different kind of government, at least in the way that the laws are written, to be able to hold people accountable, because we could never return to this time ever again.
It's an interesting time to be alive, that's for sure. And it sounds like there will be lots to look forward to in the film industry soon.
That's what we're hoping for. And some great films. That's what I'm desperate for. I'm like, I seek good films that, I don't care whether they're comedies or anything, just anything that has like honesty and authentic and something to say,
So what about you guys? What are you working on next?
Yeah, well, we're doing two things. We're doing another supernatural film that's a small independent one. And then I'm doing a very big one, which is a mini-series, a 10 one-hour episode, like Versailles, that historical drama, except this is dealing with what happened in Mexico when the Spaniards came and there was a great empire in Mexico and how it was destroyed. So it's a huge, like Game of Thrones, vast kind of project that deals with all kinds of issues and stuff that are very pertinent now, so that's what I'm working on right now. It's very intense because it's a widespread, very few people know about Cortez or the Aztecs, the empire and civilization that was here. There was like 50 to 100 million people in Mexico with cities of 1 million people, more pyramids and bigger than Egypt. And very few people know what happened, the treachery that happened, the disease that was brought over, and how it was reduced to almost, within 10 years, almost down to under 1 million people. They almost went extinct. And to me, I'm doing that one because I'm going, okay, this gives you an idea. You can go through anything, but the human spirit will rise again.
Thank you guys so much for your time and for your work raising awareness about this issue.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can find more about No Restrictions Entertainment at norestrictionsent.com. We'll add a link in the description as well. Once again, I'm Jessica Beatty. Thanks for listening to America Daily.
This is America Daily, bringing you the best in truthful news updates and in-depth reports happening now.